A Journey of Loss, Fear, and the Fight for Justice by Bo Kim. Just a few days ago, January 20th, 2025, President Donald J. Trump signed several executive orders, but two in particular struck a deep chord with me. As I watched him make these declarations, my heart swelled with emotion. Warmth, sorrow, and a feeling of being stirred to action. I could no longer express the pain that I have carried for years. On December 12, 2024, I became a U.S. citizen. That date, 12/12, holds special significance to me, not just because it marks my personal achievement, but because it's a somber day for the Korean people. For Koreans, 12/12 represents the military insurrection of 1980, when lives were lost in the struggle for democracy. That day, on the other side of the world, my journey into American citizenship began. As a God-believing person, though not a churchgoer, I believe that there are no coincidences. My path to becoming a citizen wasn't just a matter of paperwork. It feels like a divine calling to fight for my rights, to fight for my children, and to tell my story. Yesterday's executive orders struck a deep chord because they align with my own struggle. The first order calls for the restoration of freedom of speech, ensuring that no one, especially the government, can suppress our voices. The second one addresses the weaponization of government power against political opponents, a topic I know too well. Why do these executive orders matter to me? And why did they bring tears to my eyes? Let me explain. I came to the United States in 2007 as an international student with dreams of an education and a better future. But what I found instead was a life of pain, isolation, and fear. I married Ricardo S. Ormsby, a man who became my abuser. His family, including his aunt, bullied me relentlessly, seeing me as an outsider, a foreigner without any family to back me up. They made me feel like I was less than human. This wasn't just domestic violence. This was systemic cruelty, an ongoing cycle that trapped me in a corner I couldn't escape. My experience at Brigham Young University in Idaho was no different. The church, which should have been a support system, instead pressured me to stay in an abusive marriage, encouraging me to endure the violence with the belief that my husband would eventually change. They called it the sanctity of marriage. But what they failed to see was that I was drowning. I was a young woman away from my family, and no one came to help. After I had my second daughter, Jakisha, in 2010, in 2010, I finally found the courage to speak out. A professor noticed my bruises and the signs of malnutrition, and she helped me reach out to the Dove Center, a domestic violence shelter in St. George, Utah. But when I turned to my church for support, I was shamed. I was told that the Dove Center was for bad women, women who had made mistakes. My church family, the very people who should have protected me, abandoned me in my darkest hour. I fled to Idaho to stay with Ricardo's aunt, Cephlin Hepworth, hoping that her help would give me a safe space. But instead, she undermined my every decision, manipulating me with passive-aggressive comments and emotional gaslighting. Eventually, I returned to Ricardo, thinking that maybe I could make things work. I was just 21 years old, confused and manipulated by people who didn't have my best interest at heart. Looking back now, I realize the full extent of the manipulation and emotional abuse I endured. His aunt criticized me constantly, telling me I was ungrateful for her help, that I was a disgrace to my father, and that I was ruining everything. She accused me of being stubborn and disobedient to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints' rules. But none of this was my fault. I was a victim of a toxic system that placed blame on me, a young, vulnerable woman without any support network. I wanted to tell my father what was happening, but how could I? I was pregnant out of wedlock in a foreign country, and the pressure I felt from every corner was unbearable. The fear of what would happen to me, to my future, to my children was overwhelming. My story is long, and I can't tell it all at once. But I will share this part now because it still haunts me. The moment I realized I had lost custody of my children, Jaisha and Jakisha Ormsby. In 2013, after years of running away from my abusive husband and his family, I went to pick up my daughters from Ricardo's aunt's home. I had no idea that would be the last time I would hold them in my arms without someone else watching or listening. My calls and messages to Cephlin Hepworth were ignored. I was a mother who was branded as abandoning my children, even though I was desperately trying to stay in contact with my children. The court system failed me. The judge who signed the emergency custody order, Judge Mark Samuel Rammel, had a conflict of interest. His connections to plaintiffs and the defendants compromised my case. The court documents were filed and filled with lies, and my voice was silenced. I was made out to be a neglectful mother when all I wanted was to be with my children. Now, I'm telling my story because I can't stay silent anymore. I don't know what the future holds, but I know one thing. I am not the only one who has faced this injustice. There are many parents, especially biological mothers, who are facing similar struggles in the U.S. justice system. I may not have been a U.S. citizen at the time, but I am now. And my fight is far from over. The emotional toll has been immense, but I have faith that speaking out is the first step toward reclaiming my rights, my dignity, and my children. This is just a snapshot of a much longer story. I will continue to share my experiences over time, and I hope that as you read, as you listen, you feel something in your heart. If you resonate with my story, if it moves you, please stay with me. This is just the beginning, and I promise you, this story is just as important as any Netflix series. It's real, and it needs to be heard. Thank you for listening, and please share it with as many people as possible. May God's blessing be with you.